so many of whom just naturally leverage their imagination. I think the challenge is, however, which is a discussion I want to open up, is why do the elder and the corporates run by the elder and the government public service run by the elder, why do we exclude the youth? Why do we not listen and engage with the youth? Why did they all start businesses away from the elders? I can't tell you the complete disempowerment of young people in corporates that I engage with, which is many. So why is there this inability to share the value of youth with the so-called wisdom and obesity of the elder? Why? Why is the paradigm that the elder will teach the young, where the reality is, at very least, it's equal? But I'd be interested in your view, and have you had a challenge of getting the ear and authentic respect of so-called more experienced, vaguely smarter people?
Yeah, let me offer something. I think things have changed to where before older people had more information and information was valued. But in this age, we have information available for everybody. So what we need is innovation and creativity. And that's something that comes from younger people, not older. Because as you get older, you adjust. You get used to old habits. You get stable. So, you know, when you're young, though, you're trying to catch on different things. So I think that's why, you know, you're seeing more exciting ideas from young people, because we need to be out of that experience to see that. But yet, everything is still encouraging experience. Government opens a tender, 20 years experience minimum. There is building a road going on, company has to be this many years old, or you have to have people who are 40 years experienced and so on. So you, the value of experience in the workplace is still there versus the value of creativity.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Any other comments on this?
Yeah. I'll speak just from a personal point of view. So when I came up with Real Gardening and I was 16 years old, it was a school science project. I was sent to Stockholm to represent South Africa. I won an international award. It was the first African to do it. I came back to South Africa. I got an award from Thabo Mbeki at the Presidential Guest House. I was, you know, put on Oprah magazine, and all of these people wanted to take, and all I wanted was someone to help me get the business started. Yeah. And the more and more I was going to receive this award or be put on the cover of this magazine or asked to speak at this event, all I was really asking was, well, can someone support me to help me set up this business? My mother's a social worker, my father wasn't really around, so I didn't have the ability to set up the company. I needed someone to help me, and the underlying response was always, you're too young to set up a company. Bizarre. You need to go you need to go and study, you need to go into the world, you need to work under someone, and then eventually, if you feel that you can set up a company, you can. So I got a bursary to study architecture, which was always a passion of mine, and I put my heart and my soul into coming up with an alternative to the RDP housing model. And when I came out of university, I had a great model that came in cheaper than the standard RDP house. It was off the grid. It was great. And I actually was put on a really high-level think tank for Maracana Mine in 2008. And the only reason I got onto that was because I was just fresh out of university and I had access to knowledge of green technology that the older architects didn't really know was available. And that was the only really reason I was on that panel, in that think tank. But that was my first stepping stone to be able to, you know, work with older people in the building industry. I was then able to facilitate dialogue with union members much better than, mine union members much better than the people within Anglo-American Alumni I was working with. I think that was a shift for me with those gentlemen that were on the team with me when they were actually able to step back and go, we didn't understand how millennials understand the power of partnership, understand the power of connection, understand empathy, and understand that age is not a barrier, education is not a barrier, resources aren't a barrier, to understand how to look at people as people and understand what do I bring to the conversation, what do you bring to the conversation, how do we create win-win partnerships and value.
So did either of you three, haven't spoken yet, have this in theory, but perhaps an ideal model of mentor, or someone with some wisdom, to guide you with your great ideas? Did you, Jay?
Well, I think what's different perhaps now is, and the gentleman alluded to it, I think that the older paradigm was that you did need that kind of physical presence of a mentor if you were lucky enough. And I think what perhaps we've all experienced is that we don't wait for permission. I think we'll just go out and we'll watch 100 TED Talks and we'll watch YouTube till 3 in the morning and we'll be like, I've got all the mentorship I need. And, and the other thing is that I think applies is exactly these shifting sands of the paradigm. There aren't any mentors. So who's Mark Zuckerberg going to go to? Like, I mean, he's making it up as he's going along, and I kind of read into these great people here as well. So new rules are being written, and I certainly advocate that because I think these, the old solutions are trying to address unprecedented problems. I think things are getting to a point where the policies of the past and some of the business models, specifically the business models, are so out of date that you have to rewrite the rules. So that's how I see it.
Thank you for that. Doc?
So when Lucky Iron Fish was seeking its first round of funding, one of our initial investors said, your idea is great and your energy is great, but you haven't founded a company before. So when you go to meetings, bring someone with gray hair with you.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the time, I was actually really offended by that because I was saying that implies you think I don't have the ability to do this. Yeah. But actually, they're right. When you're trying to raise millions of dollars to fund your entity, you want to make sure that you have someone who's there to help advise you. So what I actually did with Lucky Iron Fish was we created an advisory board. And this was a group of people I could call on with any question, but then also as I'm pitching to governments or agencies, I can say, look at these very experienced gray-haired people who sit on this board, who advise me, and people like that. It's showing that we actually have the ability to think progressively about that.
So you used the aged symbolically. We're going to need to form a support group, Jack. Sydney?
Yes. I would give you a perspective of someone who's had an opportunity to grow up in a township. So the question around mentorship, the question around role modeling, it's always difficult to answer when you're coming from a background where you grow up or you are living in a township. Because in reality, what most young people, or what most of us would be confronted with, is that as we are growing, and you are a prominent someone in that particular township that we are growing in, and you get a certain position of power, say in government or wherever, and you are staying in the township at the time you get to that position of power, you move out of that township. And you move somewhere to Vanderbilt Park or to Three Rivers, and you're no longer in Sebokeng or in Tserela. And who is left with us in Tserela? It's the people that are involved in gang violence, the people that own our local shebeens, it's the people who are involved in criminal activities, and these are people that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately, they become our role models, they become our mentors, because they are the ones we are confronted with day in, day out. And they symbolize a particular type of success. They drive a particular kind of car. They have a particular kind of gold chain. And the one role model that we could have looked up to went out of that society. And I think not only that is the reality that most would be confronted with. I think another thing that we need to look at, I mean, if we look at, back to your first question, why are young people so removed from the older generation? It's largely because young people, I would speak from a point of a student activist. As someone who has sat in a higher education transformation summit with Minister Blade Nzimande, and you just hear the difference of worlds from what students want to achieve in terms of higher education, tertiary fees, and what the department is proposing. And you can immediately tell that these two people are coming from two totally different age groups. We are the we want it now generation. They are the let's take it a bit slowly, let's engage in dialogue. So I think the problem might be there.
Very good. And to all the people here who are in corporates and perhaps not millennials, it seems to me that listening much closer and giving much greater opportunity to the young people in companies is a no-brainer. And yet, to suggest that these bright young people should perhaps attend a company strat session or an exco is considered outrageous. Why? Why? Because I think we've seen, and it's just been, I agree with Eusebius, it's just been extraordinary to see the new paradigm evolving. So we either refuse to change with it and get left with a very big 23-story dead corporate, or we leverage the energy, imagination, and courage. And it's extraordinary, Eusebius, is it not, that in this country, the dramatic shifts have all been led by youth. 1976, fees must fall. And the civil rights movements overseas and Black Lives Matter. Extraordinary. So, non-millennials, let's open wakker. Wake up in Afrikaans. And to me, and so well represented here, this is our country's greatest resource. And either support their initiatives, not concoct these 23rd story, often iffy CSI projects to get compliance points, actually go down into the real community, find the youthful leadership that are doing cool stuff, and put your money there. What would you like to say to the non-millennials to help youth currently and coming?
There's someone on the cusp.
Someone on the cusp.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I think I wouldn't overstate the difference. I think I'm quite uncomfortable with this, actually.
Okay.
Because I do think that millennials are a little bit self-absorbed as well, and they think that they do know everything, and they get so much gratification from social media and such. Mm-hmm. So I think we must be careful about saying millennials must run your company. That might not work.
Although it has worked. I mean, some of the biggest companies in the world today are run by children.
No, absolutely. Back to Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you've got to go a little bit deeper to distill what it is exactly. Right. And the thing is, Mark Zuckerberg wrote his rules, so he knows his rules better than anyone else. So I think that there was I kind of gathered earlier some comments around role models. And I think that's, I think from a non-millennial, if we want to use this language, a millennial, I think we must be careful about creating too much of a contrast.
Good.
I think that the energy should be really centered around the quality of the ideas, as opposed to, because a lot of millennials actually have old thinking. True. So I think the value is actually in the thinking or the approach or the critical path, so to speak, of how we deal with our challenges. It's not, I think that there's inspiring people like R. Buckminster Fuller, for example, who had some of the most millennial type thinking. So there are these, I think that there's a lot of contributions to be made from people from all different perspectives, and in fact that's more valuable. So I would advocate actually how you organize around ideas and how you share energy as opposed to creating huge contrast between people.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Well, I think an interesting point that has to be considered as well is there's a massive shift for purchasing power in what generation are buying things. Baby boomers are retiring, they're on a fixed income, some of them are moving on, and millennials are actually having kids and starting families. And so when we're talking about positioning products, it's that generation that you're selling to, and who would know better to how to sell to them than ourselves. Utilizing social media and being kind of self-absorbed with Snapchat and everything is actually how a lot of companies, including mine, are selling our products. So I think it's about understanding who the market is and how you appeal to that demographic.
Thank you. Any other comments on this topic?
Yeah, I'd like to a little bit disagree on millennials taking leadership and how that would be scary. I think the world where we are right now, there is a lot of red tape and a lot of licensing, a lot of certifications that I think they keep me pretty well regulated. Even though I don't have to ask for permission, I still have to comply. And I think although people have had to deal with that, create those things, and even though, for example, most millennial companies or new companies struggle with human resources, they have terrible policies and usually bad spaces for employees. But that's something that gets fixed, by unions and people forcing us to comply and so on. So I think, like any businesses that are new or led by somebody who maybe doesn't have the same restraints as a more experienced CEO or a director or something like that, in the end, we're all learning and growing. And the difference is we're growing into our businesses. And some of that growth is going to come from making mistakes and getting licenses, trying to comply with existing laws. And one comment I would make is, for people in the audience, I come from the amazing country of Rwanda, where our president is very, very close to young people. And one of the things that he does that's very key and actually even contributed to our growth was he attends youth events. He makes sure young people come together. And if you're somewhere making a difference, you will be at some point photographed with him or the First Lady receiving an award or recognition from his speech. That makes a huge difference. I remember I won this award last year in March, and the First Lady handed me the award. It wasn't her who organized it, but the fact that she was a figure there, the next day, the following week, we had a lot of people who some of them had asked before for quotations but never came back to get the product or service. But now they're like, okay, this is a business that the First Lady knows about, or that government approves of, or whatever associations they make with that picture that appears in a newspaper. Yeah. And I think anybody who is in a position here, any CEO, if you're that close to young people who are in your company, if you listen to their ideas, and when you hear about something great, you make sure people know it's great, that's going to go a long way in helping and also changing the culture in your company to support those young ideas and young people to rise within your company.
And I just want to add on to that, because I've seen it in my own organization, and also I work with multinationals like Unilever, and understanding how they're bringing people up within their team. I think a big thing which is positive about millennials, as we are, is that we're inquisitive, we ask a lot of questions, we feel like we have the knowledge at our fingertips, and we feel like we can reach out to people in all corners of the globe, and we can be in access quite quickly. The likes of me putting on my vision board that I wanted Richard Branson to be my mentor, and completely knowing that that would happen. But trusting in the fact that there is some way in which I could access someone that could access Richard Branson. I think that's the power that we have as millennials, and we understand, and I think that needs to be incubated and trusted within organizations to grow. And if I look at how we interact with just with other people and being inquisitive and not being able, not being afraid to say I don't know, but I'm going to go and find the answer. And I think that's what stands us apart from an older generation that potentially feels like they have a certain role and that is their job and that is their function. If I look at my small office, no one really wants to be put in a box and told that this is your function and that is what you do. Everyone wants to overlap and learn from one another and kind of be part of something bigger and put their hand up and say, I want to get involved in that, or that sounds interesting and that sounds exciting, and I feel like I can teach myself to do that, and if I can't teach myself, I can find someone who can. And I think that's what sets us apart, and that's what's exciting about us, and not scary. So it shouldn't be scary.
Sort of creating the space and environment in which we allow you to share your ideas and encourage you to speak out,
and connect.
And to connect,
create spaces in which connections can happen across age groups, across countries, across demographics, and understanding the power of that connection and the power of that conversation, and how we really, as millennials, do feel like the world is a very small place that is in our pocket constantly and can get accessed with 2 clicks of a button.
Absolutely.
And just to take a shot in the dark, I think what I would say to non-millennials, because I'm in the economy of knowledge as an aspirant educator, in order for us to be able to change the face of Africa, in my opinion, in order for us to be able to change how we reach out into those downtrodden communities that don't have much resources, that we need to give that shared value to, I would say we need to target 3 main things. And there's a historical imperative to these that we need to understand. The first one being the production of knowledge, in the same light that a politics student can learn about Marxism as a political ideology, can they learn about black consciousness as a political ideology as well? Having a balance of both worlds. Secondly, I would say that it needs to be also from a religious perspective, understanding how misinterpretation of religious scripture, of religious practices, continues to perpetuate some form of inequality or the other within society. And being able to understand, to a certain degree, how we speak to religion in terms of patriarchy, in terms of sexism, in terms of racism, and all of the likes. And I think finally, it'll also be around epistemology, religion, and also, obviously, the economy. I mean, we are a generation of young people who have so much access to knowledge now as opposed to before. Learning about, for example, Burkina Faso between the periods of 1983 to 1987, learning about how concepts such as nationalization, concepts such as Pan-Africanism worked on economic growth in Burkina Faso during that period, and how it accelerated economic growth for one African country on the rest of the continent, also gives us something to look forward to. So being able to understand from a religious, from an epistemological, from an economic point of view, I think really non-millennials need to invest in those thoughts and come to us and ask us, what do you think about these, and share ideas on that.
Thank you very much. And sadly, we've run out of time. It's been a wonderful conversation. I think all of us here wish you all continued success in your amazingly innovative projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.